and welcome to Jesuitical, a podcast from American Media for saints and sinners. You can join us each week for honest conversations about the Catholic Church and our world today, sometimes over drinks. I'm Ashley McKinless, and I'm joined by Zach Davis.
It's great to be with you, Ashley.
Great to be here.
I am feeling tired, not from the baby this time.
No.
But as I think I've told people on the show before I went on paternity leave, that I'm running the New York City Marathon this year.
Yeah.
And among the more foolish endeavors I've ever embarked on with a newborn. But just finished my longest run of the training program, so I'm going to wheel this chair out of here when we're done recording in an attempt to save my legs. But
And how long is that?
20 miles.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm feeling good.
I feel like there aren't even 20 miles in Manhattan.
You know, I ran from the office to the Bronx, home to Brooklyn yesterday. So
Tri-borough race.
yeah, that's right. But we got a great show this week.
We sure do. We are talking to our friend and colleague, Colleen Dulle. She is America's Vatican correspondent, the host of the Inside the Vatican podcast, which I'm sure listeners of this show know. But she is also now the author of a great new book, Struck Down, Not Destroyed, Keeping the Faith as a Vatican Reporter.
Yeah, Colleen wrote a really good book. I continue to be annoyed with how talented she is, but delighted to feature her book and her insights on the show. And she was here in person, which we don't get to do often enough. Honestly, I see Colleen more in Rome than I do here in the United States. So it was great to have Colleen on the show again.
Yeah, and we made the terrible mistake of not giving her a drink when she was here in studio and when she had a new book out. But
she had the book launch event later that day, so she needed to be ready to go for that.
But still a very fun conversation, so stick around for that. But first we have Signs of the Times, the part of our show where we sift through the Catholic news of the week so you don't have to. So first on Sunday, Pope Leo XIV welcomed the peace agreement that, as of this recording, is still holding in the war between Israel and Hamas. Of course, that could change at any time, but for now, Pope Leo is welcoming the peace, and he encouraged, quote, the parties involved to courageously continue along the path mapped out toward a just, lasting peace that respects the legitimate aspirations of the Israeli people and the Palestinian people.
Yeah, so there have been reactions from Pope Leo, from the U.S. bishops, from a lot of places in the Catholic world. This is obviously a huge moment in the world, but also sort of a chance for Vatican-Israeli relations to take on a new point. They had hit sort of this historic low, and just throughout the Gaza war, Pope Francis was someone that spoke out pretty vehemently, in particular Israel's military strategy, pretty frequently in his final days. I think he made public comments, every week, called the Catholic parish in Gaza, I think nightly, right?
Yeah.
Up until his final days, donated a Pope Mobile to become a sort of an ambulance of sorts in Gaza. So that continued with Pope Leo also.
Yeah, they would often push back on comments that Pope Francis made. I think from their opinion, he would sometimes draw a moral equivalence between the actions of Israel and what they said was a war of self-defense and the terrorist attack of Hamas, and Hamas using human shields and making it difficult to prosecute this war and return the hostages. So they would sometimes release statements on Twitter calling out Pope Francis and asking for him to retract his statements.
Yeah, and even just last week, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who's the Vatican's Secretary of State, sort of acknowledged this line of critique from the Israeli government, and he said even in wars of self-defense that countries under at least Catholic teaching and just war theory have to follow this idea of proportionality, right? So the idea that your response to an attack can't be disproportionate to the original one, which the Vatican, I think, looked at and said Israel was in the disproportionate realm of. There have been too many people killed in this war, and we are with Pope Leo and praying for peace in this region. What's our next story, Ashley?
Yeah, so over the weekend, a group of Catholics and other community members led a Eucharistic procession in Broadview, Illinois, leading up to the ICE detention facility where migrants are currently being held and are not really having their pastoral needs met. So they had this procession. It was led by a Jesuit who was hoping that they would be able to gain access to the ICE detention facility.
Yeah, so this is just outside of the city of Chicago in the western suburbs. I'm sure, like a lot of people, they've seen who have seen a these videos on social media of ICE activity in the area. Really, really troubling. But I got to admit, this idea or this image of the Eucharist sort of being marched to this detention center, really compelling. There are actual like pastoral needs at play here, right? There are Catholics inside who not only don't have access to their families right now, but also don't have access to the sacraments. And the group didn't expect that the entire procession would be let in, but they had hoped that there would be a couple Eucharistic ministers let in to administer the sacrament, which I should say is somewhat standard practice, or I guess I don't know if it's a standard, but it's been allowed in the past. So it's not like this was just some political stunt to draw attention.
Yeah, and this is playing out in other cities too. A few months ago, the Archbishop of Miami, Archbishop Wensky, led a group of bikers, like motorcycle riders, to the Alligator Alcatraz ICE detention facility in Florida, and they prayed the rosary there as kind of like an act of protest to try to get access to the facility, which in that case I believe has worked, but across the country.
But it took a couple attempts for sure. It's definitely an uneven standard that's being applied as to whether or not people are allowed to just receive, routine pastoral care in detention. So that's a story we will continue to follow. Wanted to give an update for our next story. Ashley, last week you mentioned that Pope Leo was coming out with his first document, Dilexi Te, which is English, the Latin for I have loved you. Thought we'd just give a little bit of context here. I read the document. You read the document?
I did.
There, we've put up coverage on americamagazine.org, giving sort of our 5 takeaways as an editorial staff here, along with some other coverage. But for this audience, we thought maybe we would just really set up what this document is, why it came out now, and sort of what to expect when you read it.
Yeah, so it was an apostolic exhortation. So this is a document that popes write. It has a little lower doctrinal authority than something like an encyclical. It's not something that's defining doctrine, but
something like Laudato Si, or other social encyclicals. This is a lower level.
Yeah, so these exhortations are often kind of reflections from the Pope on a specific community or specific theme of the Christian life. So this apostolic exhortation from Pope Leo came out at 21,000 words, broken up into 5 chapters. So it's a manageable read. We were able to do it in a few hours.
Just looked it up. An hour if you're just like blowing through it.
Okay.
If you're not looking up anything else or footnotes, but should take about an hour according to this Google AI summary when I asked how long does it take to read 20,000 words. So give yourself an hour.
Yeah. And this was actually begun under Pope Francis in the final months of his life. He started writing this, and then Pope Leo decided to take it up, which is something that Pope Francis did with his first document. It had been started by Pope Benedict, and then Francis kind of carried it over the finish line.
Yeah, and I got to admit, I read a lot of Francis when I was reading this document. Leo signed it. It's Leo's document, of course, but I couldn't help but hear things in Pope Francis's voice, someone who we've spent a lot of time reading and covering. You pick up on some things and some ways of speaking for sure, but you can tell that Pope Leo definitely added some remarks and embellishments and things. So it is sort of this one of these places in the church where you can see this continuity.
I actually did the count for our takeaways article, and it was 58 citations for Pope Francis.
Oh, yeah. So he is cited quite a bit. Yeah. So Francis either cited himself quite a bit, or Pope Leo was drawing on him. So the structure of the document, it's 5 chapters, as you said. First chapter is an intro. Second chapter is sort of an overview of Scripture and its calls to care for the poor. Third chapter is like a history of saints and religious orders and their charism for caring for the poor. And 4 is the sort of the meat of Leo's reflection on the poor and poverty today. And finally it gets to chapter 5, which is sort of a call for Christians to recommit themselves to loving and serving the poor. Yeah,
so we want to take this on in greater length and depth in a future interview. But you can now read the document, see America's coverage at americamagazine.org, and Inside the Vatican Podcast had a really great episode on it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, for our show, what I am wondering about is, what does this mean for me spiritually, this sort of invocation to care for the poor, right? Like, you know that that's part of the Christian life, but the way that the document sort of elevates its importance, reminded me that, am I doing enough? Is my parish doing enough? Am I praying with the poor? Do I know the poor? I know it raised a lot of questions that I don't think we ask ourselves enough, and we don't ask ourselves in a blunt way in the church. So that's the kind of thing I hope we could get into after we've both, prayed with the idea.
Yes, not
in the
blown
document.
through it in an hour.
Yeah, that's right. What is our last story?
So Pope Leo was gifted a horse today before his general audience, and that man loves horses. I have not seen him smiling that broadly since he became Pope.
No, you can't fake that. That was it was not a Trojan horse, but a Polish one. A Polish man donated a purebred Arabian horse to Pope Leo, and it was from a Catholic horse breeder in Poland, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
The horse does appear to be white, to match Pope Leo's white vestments. I'm not an equestrian, but it seemed like he was pretty comfortable around the horse, like leading it. Clearly not afraid. When I go up to horses, they can smell the fear in me. No such in Pope Leo.
No, yeah, that the horse reflected the calm and confidence that Pope Leo felt guiding him around, and the guy who gave it to him was like, he really didn't want to let go. Like, we had to drag him to go to deliver his address for the audience.
Yeah, so the Polish man who gifted it to him said he was inspired after he saw a photo on social media of Pope Leo in Peru on a horse, which I don't know if you know the picture. It's a great one. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, obviously, this guy loves horses. I must give him a horse. Turns out the horse's name is Proton, which is like a fine name for a Catholic horse, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
I don't
we like
really
science
get it.
and stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not. I like know more about naming craft beers than I do craft horses, so not as well versed there. But Proton is going to live at Castel Gandolfo, where there are stables reportedly, and Leo's been spending his Tuesdays, which is his off day, at Castel Gandolfo. So I would not be surprised if Pope Leo takes up horse riding on his days off.
I believe it.
This got me thinking. Dilexi Te in this story, the highest. So when a pope speaks infallibly, mm-hmm. that's the second highest level of papal authority. The highest is when it's straight from the horse's mouth.
Oh my God. It doesn't even make sense.
I think it makes plenty of sense. So Pope Leo, congratulations on your new horse.
I hope he does spend some time riding the horse on Tuesdays. All right, now stick around for our conversation with Colleen Dulle about her new book, Struck Down, Not Destroyed, Keeping the Faith as a Vatican Reporter. Joining us in studio is Colleen Dulle. Colleen is the Vatican correspondent for America Magazine and host of the Inside the Vatican podcast and the author of the new book that is beautiful, Struck Down, Not Destroyed, Keeping the Faith as a Vatican Reporter. Welcome back, Colleen.
Thank you.
So
it's
good
great
to have
be
you
with
in
you
studio.
in person, although a little bit of a downgrade from Rome, I think.
Yeah, we should really only do this in Rome, but this will have to do. I do want to start with a couple just like basic questions, like how on earth did you write a book when you were raising a baby? As someone with a newborn, I'm mystified by that.
He could barely read it.
The book predates the baby's birth, but it does not predate the pregnancy. And so this is my hot take about pregnancy is that, like, the thing that gets sort of dismissed as nesting instinct in women, I experienced it as just a ton of creative energy. So the whole time I was doing the nursery prep or whatever, but doing DIY projects, and also it was during that time that this editor from Random House emailed me, and we fully formed the idea for this book. And so I felt like I had a ton of energy to put into this book. Now, once the baby arrived, I didn't write anything for months.
Okay. All right. That makes me feel a little better.
And then finish it up on weekends and stuff.
So talking about that moment of there's a book here. What was the kind of kernel of the story that you wanted to tell?
I mean, I think it's just that people come up to me all the time and are like, here's this really upsetting headline that I read about the church. One, can you explain it to me? And two, what the heck does this mean for my Catholicism or even my relationship with God? And so I wanted to write about, because it's a question I get a lot, you're still practicing. How are you still doing that when you're seeing all this crap every day?
I always knew you were a Catholic nerd, but before were reading this book, I didn't really understand the extent of it and how early it started. So can you bring us back to
why you're so
Why you're
such a nerd?
Catholic nerd?
Yeah, no, like your journey to becoming a Vatican correspondent started pretty early. Like you were interested in like the Catholic news part of the church from a young age.
This is really weird because my best friend remembers when we were in high school. She's coming tonight, by the way, to the book launch.
Very exciting.
She remembers me saying to her that I thought I might make a good Vatican correspondent. And like, I don't remember that happening, but she does, so I trust it.
And you're like, I'm studying French. I should probably switch my language.
So I mean, this is high school. It's like even pre declaring a major. I entered college as a PR major, so obviously this idea of reporting on the Vatican had since disappeared whenever it had come up. And then I didn't really like what I was doing in PR, so I made one of these lists of like, here's what I like that I'm doing and here's what I don't like, and all of the likes overlapped with journalism, so I switched my major. And then I just kind of happened into Catholic media because the first place that answered my applications for a summer internship was the diocesan paper in St. Louis. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing that this summer. And then the next summer I was at Catholic News Service in D.C., went back there the following summer, and then I came here with y'all.
Amazing. Could you just tell our audience how the book is structured? So you take a number of scandals that involve the church.
Every single chapter takes on a church scandal or like something people find difficult in the church. Like I wouldn't call, some people would call the lack of inclusion of women in leadership in the church a scandal. I don't think I would go that far, but it is a thing that people struggle with. So each chapter takes on a scandal, and then I explain kind of the basics. I do some more analysis of like root causes and the background. And throughout it, I weave in how I was wrestling with my own faith and my own Catholicism while covering that story.
Yeah, and we want to focus in on one of those scandals, and that's one that we've talked about on the show a lot, and it's the division among Catholics over the traditional Latin Mass, the pre-Vatican II Mass. So bring us back to you, in addition to being a Catholic nerd earlier in your life.
I think this is part of being a Catholic nerd.
Well, you were also a bit of a trad cath earlier in your Catholic career. So bring us back to when you started going to the Latin Mass.
Oh gosh. Well, it was just after the Benedict papacy, but still like his influence was very much being felt. And I was in all these like Catholic reading groups and stuff that were awesome, but like the thing that smart Catholics were doing was going to Latin Mass. And so I started checking it out with some friends, and I share the story in the book of the first time I went. I like rode up to the big Latin Mass church on my little bike and walked in, and they were like, okay, there's confessions open before Mass. And I was like, okay, I'll go to confession. I'd never been to confession inside of like the box from the movies,
Yeah, like, oh, they still make this.
Yeah, right. So, I don't know. I was educated like by very, Vatican II nuns and stuff. So I was always like, yeah, let me just sit and talk to the priest. But I like go into the little box and I kneel down, and there's this big velvet curtain that closes behind me, and I can't see anything. And I can't hear anything, so I'm like, I guess I'll just start listing off the sins. And so I did, and like halfway through my confession, the priest slides open the thing, and I can like see him through the little grate now, and I'm like, crap.
Turns out only God heard that. It doesn't even count.
It doesn't even count. Yeah, so and then I did my confession, and I went out to the Latin Mass, and it's like kind of uncomfortable at first because it's a different language, but also it's like very beautiful, and the music was really good because this was in New Orleans, and a lot of their churches have like great musicians. And then I also realized like halfway through that Mass that I was the only woman especially who didn't have my shoulders covered, whereas I had like worn my nicest Easter dress. I was like, I'm so like ready to be very formal at this Mass, and then it was like, oh, but no, I grew to love it, and I loved the music, and I still really cherish the traditions and know all my responses and stuff, but as we'll talk about in the chapter, like it really became a source of kind of pain and division, and that was something I had to actively work to overcome.
Yeah, I think I related to a lot of what you wrote about in that chapter.
Because you used to be a tradcast too, right?
Yeah,
You're
I
a
went
Latin Mass
to
guy.
Latin Mass, and I think a lot of times what gets lost in some of the debates about this is I don't know, that people are projecting their old gripes about, what they thought about when Vatican II was happening onto younger Catholics. And, the way we encounter sort of more traditional devotions, whether it's Latin Mass or Eucharistic Adoration or the Rosary, is totally distinct from the way, like, we don't really see it as baggage.
Yeah,
It's almost like we're kind of like still discovering
exactly.
our faith when we encounter these things a lot of times. And I just wish, like, I'm really excited for the world to kind of read this, because it does, like, break open a young person's experience in real time of what it's like to go through some of this stuff.
Yeah. I had a really surprising conversation with Jerry about this, by the way. Like, our
colleague, Gerard O'Connell, your co-host.
My co-host on Inside the Vatican, who's our Vatican correspondent and who grew up, in a whole different era and also a different, like, context. He was born and raised in Ireland. But we were talking about the book after he read it, and he was like, your experience of the church has been, like, really negative. He's like, and for me, it was shocking to hear that somebody had grown up in a church that was not in crisis. I was like, what is that like?
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you're encountering the Latin Mass. You're discovering all these different devotions. Talk to me about when that starts to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, as I was writing the chapter, I had to kind of examine this too, because, for telling a story and writing, you're trying to, like, explode a moment, right? So it's like, where's the moment that it really broke? And I always thought, and I had this whole chapter mapped out, that it was going to be like, well, in the lead up to the 2016 election, it all got, like, really political, and I was increasingly uncomfortable with what I was hearing from the pulpit there. But when I really, like, stopped and examined it and started writing through it, I realized that the moment that broke it was the death of my friend, which I write about in the book. And the reason that, this happened, that I felt I couldn't go back to the Latin Mass, was that she died by suicide. And I was really worried that there would be people in the Latin Mass community who would still hold, like, the previous Catholic belief, which has been revised for decades, right? I think you wrote a whole feature article on this, Ashley. That, that anyone who dies that way is in hell. And I was like, I cannot be around people who believe that. Now, did I check to see if anybody in that community believed that? No, but I assumed that. And so I didn't feel like I could process my grief there in the way that I wanted to. And so I just started staying away and, was staying away from Mass a little bit. Eventually found this, like, very progressive community that felt a little bit more like what I needed at the time. And then over time, those divisions that did happen, especially around the 2016 election, are getting worse and worse in the Catholic Church.
Yeah. One thing that's really beautiful about the book is how you interweave your personal experience with what's happening in the capital C Church at that time. So I'm wondering, this was obviously a really tragic event, and it took time to process. How did seeing how people out there were talking about the liturgy wars kind of influence your own experience of the liturgy?
I think that it made me a bit more reactionary than I would have been. If this were just a liturgical experience that I felt a little bit alienated from, that would be one thing. But we're working in Catholic media. We're seeing, like, these fights play out on social media all the time. And, like, this was before I had, kind of reached an equilibrium in how much media is the right amount of media to consume.
And you feel like you have to have an opinion about everything.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's tweeting all the time, And also, like, I would be getting, like, hate on stuff I wrote, like we all do. And so...
I love that on the other hand. Just feels me. But I get it.
Yeah, it's not me. I should not read the comments. So it was all of that. I think it was, like, the online discourse that was then getting mapped into the liturgical experience. And so, I started to, like, go to masses at more quote unquote progressive churches, but I still had kind of, like, a longing for some of those traditional things. Like, I write in the book about when I moved here and I was going to St. Paul the Apostle. I would go to the young adult mass. It's like a community famous for being very gay friendly and everything, but also they sing the Salve Regina in Latin at the end of Mass every time, and I loved that. So yeah, it was Yeah, it was the online discourse that was really toxic that I think started to influence the experience of the liturgy for me.
Yeah, and maybe we should just map out what was happening in the liturgy wars at that time, Pope Francis's restrictions and the response to that.
Pope Francis put some restrictions on the Latin Mass, and I mean, he says it's because he talked to bishops around the world and they were like, this has become a really politicized thing, and too often is basically people who like the Latin Mass are too often denying the legitimacy of Vatican II. Now, there's been additional reporting on, whether that was really the case, whether that was really what came out in the survey that was sent to bishops. But
for what it's worth, my own personal experience, that's correct.
It rang true when he made that decision.
Not everybody, obviously, but
yeah. And so, with that clampdown on the Latin Mass, which it wasn't even like fully banned, right? A lot of it was left up to bishops. But you did have to get like certain approvals from Rome to celebrate it and stuff. Anyway, yeah, that's the kind of thing that's happening, and it then makes that community feel very persecuted. A complaint that we hear a lot is like, what is synodal about this? So that made it all a lot more tense.
And I appreciated this little anecdote into your marriage that you start this chapter with, which is like you start sort of closer to present day, and there's this, your husband gives you a challenge.
Yeah, a dare.
A dare. Yeah, that's even better. A dare. Could you tell me, take me back to that?
Okay, so yeah, this was pre-marriage, but we're engaged, so he was my fiance at the time. And I was living here, and I was complaining about the trads, probably complaining about some hate I got on the internet, just knowing the environment at that time. And Simon was like, I think you hate these people. Like, I think you honest to God hate these people. And I was like, oof, like, I think you might be right.
Which,
and
I pause there. Like, I can think of a lot of other people who wouldn't care about that at all. Be like, yeah, I do hate those people.
They hate me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't know why I reacted that way.
Well, I think because you're a good person trying to live out the gospel, I would say.
I appreciate that.
Probably. It's probably why you said, when someone accused you of hating a group of people, you probably recoiled at it.
I feel like I should love my neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Simon is like, what I think you should do, stirring the pot a little bit, is that you should go to Latin Mass every other week for the rest of the summer.
So much wisdom in this suggestion. He knows every week will kill you.
Yes, exactly. He's like, you can have your LGBT friendly mass and whatever every other week. Yeah. And so I'm not one to declare defeat, especially from a romantic partner. And so I was like, okay, like, bet, you're on. And the first time that I went back to Latin Mass in years as part of this dare, it was awful, man. I found this church. I probably couldn't even find it again, but somewhere in like Lower Manhattan.
We're not feeling any nostalgia.
Yeah, the closest to nostalgia I got was like, oh, I still know these answers, but quickly that was like weaponized into like, let me show all these people that I still know the responses, even though they hate me. And
they probably
whatever.
know that I'm...
Yeah, exactly.
Did you wear a sleeveless dress on purpose just to...
I don't remember what I wore. It was summer, so maybe. Okay. I did not wear a veil, though, and I felt like that might be noticed. Yeah, it's just like, just all these awful like assumptions that I knew I was making and knew that was exactly what I was there to counteract, and yet like getting control of them was so hard. At some point during that mass, I'm like shaking with anger. I'm like, should I leave? Should I walk out? And then I was like, no, because that would be declaring defeat. and like, of course, like the way God works is like the moment of consolation ends up coming when I'm like, okay, like I cannot go up to communion. Like I cannot go up and kneel down at this communion rail and like open my mouth and like have this guy put the body of Christ inside. Like that, it feels weird. It's making me really uncomfortable. But I was like, I'm gonna push through it. I'm gonna do it anyway. And I did it. And I'm walking back to my seat and I'm realizing like the same Eucharist that they're celebrating here, they're also celebrating a few blocks away, like at the Catholic Worker Soup Kitchen on the table where they make the soup. and they're celebrating it in all of the parishes of all of the people that I feel like I get along with really well, and they're celebrating it in all the parishes of all the people that I really don't get along with. We are one body, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so for the rest of the summer, I did the dare, and I did end up finding a parish that I liked better that did Latin Mass, that was just like felt more welcoming, and ended up liking it so much that I went back a few times after that summer. Took a friend there and stuff.
Well, I think what I appreciate about your account is one that it's honest about the disagreement and the discomfort you have with this type of worship, with the people who are engaging in that type of worship. And it's sort of like, I'm feeling this thing I know is judgmental, but I just at least have to name it, because otherwise if you just went and kind of, I don't know, went along to get along, or wrote about it in a way like where you tied a neat little bow on everything.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right. I don't think that's a true story, and I don't think that's what we're being asked to do in a synodal church either, right? But you took this big issue, right, this sort of liturgy wars, and center it. It's like, no, there's actually, this is reflected in my heart. The title of the chapter is Schism in the Heart.
Right.
This is something that's actually, I need to work on myself before like I can do anything about the sort of big picture thing. And you are in a position more than most Catholics to do something about the big picture. I don't mean to suggest that you're like advocating, you're like not advocating one side or another, but you are closer to the people that make decisions like this than every other person.
Sure.
And yet the thing that really matters is
what's going on in your heart. Right. Yeah. And I mean, this whole exercise was an exercise in adjure contra, right? I'm probably saying that wrong, but this Ignatian idea of, if there's something that you feel resistance to doing, is probably more of a reason to do it, right? If there's a Jesuit who's afraid of working with old people, they're probably going to assign him to a nursing home, because that's maybe where God has something to say to him.
I want to go back to, we kind of skipped over a really important middle part here. So your friend dies.
Yeah.
You can no longer find comfort in the Latin Mass. But you also are having trouble finding comfort in any Mass. So I'm curious how you were able to, after this harrowing experience, come back to the church that at points in its history would have said that your friend can't go to heaven.
Yeah. I think there are two things. One was that, I was finding it really difficult to pray, but one night I was just like taking a walk at night around my college campus, and I ended up on top of our parking garage, and like the wind was blowing really strong and like whipping around, and I looked up at the moon, and it was a yellow crescent, which was the symbol of the high school that me and my friend had gone to. And so of course, like, I'm thinking of her, and suddenly she feels really present to me. And I just felt in that moment, like I felt like she was there with me, and I felt like she was telling me that like she was okay, that she was in a good place now. And so like I had that experience to kind of listen to and take consolation. And the other thing is that just like Catholicism is just the way I know how to grieve, I remember we talked about this after Pope Francis died, right? Like how it was really important for me to get to Rome to see his body before they closed the casket, because I grew up going to these Irish Catholic wakes, and like that's what you do. And for me, like, a person is not dead until you see that, right? But yeah, so I end up kind of running back to the Mass because I felt like I needed it, because I felt like, yeah, it was the only way to get through it. And I did find that community that felt more welcoming. It's actually the place that I still go to church now, when I don't have my 2-year-old with me, because then we got to do the 30-minute quick Mass.
Yeah, we got to swap tips on that.
Dude, I it's just a struggle.
Great.
And then, then I finished college and I moved up here, and I was still going to these like kind of progressive parishes, but I found that like grieving in that space started to come really naturally. So like there would be the part of Mass where they're like, you pray about like those who have, come before us and those who have fallen asleep in the peace of Christ or whatever. And like I would always think of her then, and I would always find it really like in a space where I felt safe to grieve. I felt like I could think of her really easily, and I could kind of like commend her to God in a way that didn't feel forced and didn't feel like burdened by all these liturgical arguments or church law arguments or whatever. And eventually, like, I was able to work through it, and I felt like I got to an okay place, and I still pray about her during that part of Mass. But ultimately it was just like the Catholic Church has ways of getting you through grief, I think, and the funeral liturgy is one of those, but it's ongoing too.
We focused on, I think, probably the most personal portion of the book, the chapter of the book, but you do a ton of great just like nuts and bolts explaining about the Vatican, how it works, both in scandal and outside of scandal, that I thought was really well done.
Thanks.
It's been, as your colleague, it's like, I've been here throughout your...
You have, dude.
We both have reporting career.
All,
So it's fun to kind of like go back and see the highlights. Wanted to like just do one section that I really appreciated towards the end of the book when you're writing about the Synod on Synodality, and you're kind of reflecting on what you've seen as a Vatican reporter. You say, I'd gotten to know the Vatican as a place made up of people, a sort of worldwide company with a ton of mismanagement and corruption that also happened to be the largest charity in the world, with an army of diplomats whose main goal is peace, led by a guy whose election is always surrounded by political battles and gossip, but who is also somehow chosen by the Holy Spirit. Believing all of it, despite knowing so much of what goes on, is hard to ask of anyone. I saw a lot of my own feelings in that paragraph. People always say like when you're so close to how the sausage is made, like
the thing you always say about I was a better Catholic before I knew my bishop's name.
Yeah, totally. Before I knew any bishop's name,
exactly.
Right? I think it was way simpler, and I'm curious where you're at right now with your relationship to the Vatican. Particularly, this you finished writing all this before the conclave.
Yep.
That was I think that could have. I'm sure that was a huge regret not to have like one more chapter.
I know, yeah.
About how that worked, but how are things these days?
I think the big thing that I've come to realize is like I opened the book with the very first sentence is, the first time I saw St. Peter's Basilica, I felt nothing.
Which is crazy to me, but
yeah, I know. It was surprising to me too. I was surprised at my own like ambivalence.
I love taking people around, like you just like kind of cross.
Oh yeah.
Like turn a corner
and all of a sudden it's there.
Boom.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. You may have tried to like do that.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. And you're like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully I was alone for the very first one.
And we should say you were there to cover a summit on sex
abuse. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that put a damper on it.
It did.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But no, now when I got to like cross in front of that way so many times during the conclave most recently, I often ask myself like what's different now, and I think the big difference is that instead of being this like big kind of faceless building or like institution or entity, now I know it as people. Like now I know a lot of the people who are working inside of it every day, and I know that some of them are like the most amazing people you'll ever meet, who have like given up their lives in service of something that they feel called to and that is much bigger than themselves. And then you have some people who just work there to pay the rent, and like that's okay too. And you have some people who are there for maybe negative motivations, serve their own egos, whatever, but like it is all just people. And so my relationship with the Vatican is my relationship with the different people who make it up. And like, yeah, that's still a relationship.
I've been reflecting on it. Feels different in some ways. My entire professional Catholic media career was during the Francis papacy.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like in flux right now, in these early days of Leo, it's
Same.
like, yeah, it's because it's like it feels all new, and we haven't really had any major changes or decisions from Leo yet. So it is kind of this like very much in between
What's
time.
it gonna be?
Yeah, especially for those of us that are like looking at the headlines every day. And
No, right, yeah.
even you mentioned, Ashley, like looking for wire photos. It
Yeah.
was Francis's face every day that you went and looked at,
right,
and now
yeah.
it's Leo's face.
Yeah, I want to connect kind of the experience of being a Vatican reporter, being someone who's following every headline, knows all the dirty details, with the experience of the liturgy that you talked about earlier in the conversation, because I find that it's very hard to not be kind of like self-conscious at Mass, like to turn off the professional Catholic brain and be in the moment and not feel like, okay, where does this fit in the
I know this
the
happened to me
liturgy
like
wars?
literally last week.
So yeah, okay. So you still struggle with it, but I imagine you have some days where you could be present in the mass.
Yeah.
What's your experience of that?
Gosh, I feel like it comes out the worst when like politics are brought up at Mass. That's the one time that I'm like, oh, what's the America take on this?
I'm like the harshest homily critic.
Oh, me too.
I don't really I try not to like share, but the entire time I'm evaluating.
I know.
Which is not good.
My like exercise in self-control is to not say anything once I like get into the car after Mass. Like not to say anything to Simon.
I will not. I love to talk to him about
know,
what just
I know.
happened.
Well, even for like Jesuitical, when we do the faith sharing, I'm like, I find myself at math like trying to like,
Oh, what like what's
mine
the insight?
where's
yeah.
the consolation coming?
Yeah.
And
Thankfully,
it's just so
like
hard to. Yeah.
Thankfully, I don't have to do too much spiritual writing, so like I can just do the headlines. But I get really annoyed at like when I feel like the priest or whoever is like not aware enough of what's going on. And you know, I've been to masses where like the priest is really anti-synod. I'm sitting there like, I want to tell you things about the synod. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard. I don't have a nice, clean answer. I guess the times that it's best for me is, you know, one, if the priest doesn't touch on any hot topics, but two, like, when somehow grace takes over.
Yeah, and it may be a heightened problem for people who work in Catholic media, but you say at the end of the book, I think, like, it's impossible to be a Catholic today and not have cognitive dissonance. Like, you have this experience of your parish community, the people who are Catholics that you absolutely love, and then this human, flawed church, and keeping those things together is hard, I think, for everyone.
Yeah. But like any good psychologist or whatever will say, like, the ability to hold multiple truths at the same time is a sign of maturity or like integration, right? Like, throughout the whole book, I don't really reach any nice, clean answers. It's really one of the lessons from like the very first chapter is like there is inherent value in the wrestling that you do with these things. I write about being on a retreat and praying with the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel in the Old Testament and how God could have just beat him, been done with it, but he decides to wrestle Jacob in a way where they're evenly matched all night long. Okay, if God decides to do that, then there has to be value in that kind of wrestling. And so, yeah, my goal with this book is just to help people, one, feel that they're not bad Catholics for wrestling, and two, to say, you're not the only one doing this. You're not the only one who feels this way. Here's like some info if you want to wrestle with the facts, and here's how I've been wrestling with it. But ultimately, like, the answer is up to you.
Well, I won't confirm or deny if you're a bad Catholic or not, but you are a good wrestler, and I think
Writer.
And that is very evident in the book. And congratulations. It's quite the triumph. We're excited to celebrate with you later tonight. We're here in New York for the book launch.
Well, and like, thank you guys for being on the whole journey. Like, you're in the book all the way through. You know, chapter 1 is the abuse crisis in 2018 when I first started here, and like all of us were going through this crap together. I was at a bar with Ashley when the McCarrick report came out.
I remember that.
And I read it on a PDF in the bathroom. And you know, and then the last chapter is the synod. The last chapter could be the conclave, but like we were all there for all of that. So I appreciate that you guys have
It
been...
was the friends we made along the way.
There's the nice bill we were looking for.
Oh, God.
But before we let you go, we do have one final question for you.
Yes, you know it's coming.
Yet I'm never ready for it.
No one ever is.
Nope. If you could canonize one person, living or dead, Catholic or not, fictional or real, who would it be and why?
Well, since we were just talking about the conclave and also much about grief, I think I'm going to pick Pope Francis.
Ah.
Yeah. I don't like to canonize living people. Go into that a lot in the book about when your heroes disappoint you. But yeah, Pope Francis, he's the reason that, we're here. I don't know. He was the Pope throughout so much of our careers, and he's meant so much to me personally. I spent every waking hour for the last 7 years thinking about him. So yeah, Pope Francis, still miss him.
Pray for us. All right. The book is Struck Down, Not Destroyed, Keeping the Faith as a Vatican Reporter. You can find it wherever books are sold. And it's by Colleen Dulle, our colleague, who you can listen to on the Inside the Vatican podcast. Colleen, congratulations. It's so good to be with you.
Thank you.
Congrats. And now we have As One Friend Speaks to Another, the part of our show where we talk about where we're finding God in our lives and share stories of faith from across the Catholic Church. And Zach, this week we got the news that we knew was coming eventually, but it is still always sad to lose an icon.
Yeah, that's right. Sister Jean Dolores Schmidt, B.V.M., passed away October 9th. She was at the ripe old age of 106.
And had just retired, stopping
a couple
her
months
work.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. She, for those who don't know, she was chaplain to the basketball team at Loyola University Chicago, my alma mater. Became sort of an icon, a celebrity nationwide when Loyola went on their run to the Final Four in 2018. But before that, I knew Sister Jean quite well. I was a part of her Tuesday night prayer group on campus where she hosted people in her apartment with candles and cookies where we reflected on that week's gospel. And she was just an incredibly present person on campus for so many students, in these tributes that are coming in, testify that, random person who commuted in who maybe spent an hour a week in the student center, Sister Jean would find and ask how their day was going and how their semester was going, and really made a difference in the lives of so many people. She contributed to this podcast. We got to talk to her about her memoir about what she learned in the first 100 years of her life. And I got to admit, I was still surprised when I saw the news, because eventually you start wondering, is this person, 106, that's incredible. What a run. But some of the spiritual lessons I was trying to glean from this, one is just the persistence or the energy it takes to sustain a vocation of that long. Sister Jean never rested. There was one time I accidentally stumbled into the 7 a.m. campus mass. And sure enough, Sister Jean was right there, right? And so she was up early in the morning, before any of the students, but she still stayed up with them to help, she lived and worked a student's schedule as well when she was ministering on campus, indefatigable. And I think that's because she was grounded, right? And the reason for her mission. And that was because she loved Jesus a lot and wanted to serve him and wanted to serve the students and introduce the people that she met to him. So I think that's one, and that's a lesson I will take from her. The other thing was I was reflecting on some of my own emotions around the news, and when someone dies at 106, there's grief, but there's also consolation. And I wrote in my tribute for her, confidence that you know where she is. But typically when someone dies, you're caught up in either grief or regret or lots of emotions that sort of make it difficult to see the fullness of the Paschal mystery that we believe as Christians. And so we have these rituals to kind of remind us, in these prayers to kind of remind us of what we actually believe in life after death and what God has in store for us. But, when someone's 106, you're sad, but it's not this overbearing sadness. And so you can sort of see the line between consolation and grief a little bit more clearly. And I that reminded me that these things do often exist together, even if I can't always feel them. And so, Sister Jean, thank you for teaching me yet one more lesson. I am going to miss you, but a job well done.
Yes, and pray for us.
Amen. Amen.
All right, I'll get us out of here. Jesuitical is made by us, Sebastian Gomes, Will Gualtieri, and Kevin Christopher Robles. Faith formation provided by Father Eric Sundrup, S.J. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, or like the show on your favorite platforms. You can support Jesuitical by subscribing to America Magazine at americamagazine.org. I'm Ashley McKinless with Zach Davis. We'll see you next week.